Hello and welcome to this new video from me. And yeah, Regulation I got really weird because there is some stuff that we didn't expect at first, but we will get to that in a little bit. First, I want to mention what this video is all about. I want to take a look at the results from the biggest Regulation I online tournament we've had so far. And I will also give you some sets for the Pokemon I made Ultimate Guide videos about already, because I don't plan to do new Ultimate Guide videos on the old restricteds I already featured, but for the new restricteds that I don't have a Ultimate Guide video on my YouTube channel, like Terapagos, Kyogre, Koraidon. For those, I will still make Ultimate Guides in Regulation I, but for Zamazenta, Miraidon, Kelly Ice, and Kelly Shadow, you can find sets of them today. And we will talk about the usage statistics. We will talk about how this might affect Regulation I in the future, and we will obviously talk about the results in general. So let's get started. So we had a Victory Road April challenge last weekend, April 5th to 6th, and we had a lot of players actually with 263, and we played 10 Swiss rounds, so 8 Swiss rounds day 1, you need 6-2 to get into day 2, you play 2 Swiss rounds in day 2, you needed 8-2 to get into Top Cut, and then I think there were 15 people in Top Cut, and it was won by Lorenzo Silvestrini, which is crazy because the last Regulation G Victory Road tournament was also won by Lorenzo, so that is a really good consistency. Speaking of consistency, you can see on the screen which team he used. It's not super spectacular. We will take a look at the PokePastes after I looked at the usage stats, okay? I think that is a fair deal, but as you can see, Shadow Rider Zama won the whole thing. Going into Regulation I, everybody expected this duo to be strong, and it apparently is. We unfortunately also see Dondozo placing or getting into finals after an 8-0 Swiss one in day 1, as far as I know. Really sad because I thought it's over for the fish, but it apparently isn't. And yeah, we also see some interesting cores like Lunala Miraidon, but then again, Zama Shadow Rider, Zacian Shadow Rider, and then Terapagos Shadow Rider. And I gotta say, myself included, that I thought Terapagos is kind of a fraud because in a double restricted format, a lot of players will run Zamazenta, right? And then there's also Koraidon, and you cannot defensively Terra, and you don't have the support options as a restricted as well. That's why I thought Terapagos isn't as good, but the conversion rate of Terapagos is insane, I can say that at least. We also see some Koraidon, and for non-restricteds, as you can see, Chiyu is pretty good, Urshifu, Rillaboom, Incineroar, Ogapon, Halflame, and Cornerstone. And yeah, I think a lot of teams look the same. Like, for example, 13th and 14th place, where both Japanese players have 5 of the same Pokemon. And Terapagos really likes Shadow Rider as a partner. We also see Terapagos Koraidon placing 10th. And you might say, isn't this anti-synergy? Because Terapagos, when it terras, it removes the sun for Koraidon. But it actually isn't, because you can time when you want to Terra, and the Pokemon that Terapagos struggles against, Koraidon can eat them as breakfast, basically. Mainly Zamazenta, as well as Zacian. If you go Terra Fire, you can punish Zacian. And I feel like Koraidon Terapagos has something really interesting. And yeah, we also see Miraidon Kelly Ice placing 15th. I think Miraidon Kelly Ice was something a lot of players, here's the bracket by the way, Miraidon Kelly Ice is something a lot of players thought is going to be the best duo because you have this Bolt Beam Speed sandwich, which means Bolt Beam coverage, you have Ice Electric coverage, which is insane because electric types struggle against grass and ground types, while ice types struggle against water types, and you have this insane coverage. And Speed Sandwich means you have a very slow and a very fast Pokemon. So if Trick Room is up, people struggle against Kelly Ice. If Trick Room is not up, people struggle against Miraidon. That's basically how it is supposed to work, and that's why this Bolt Beam Speed Sandwich of Miraidon, Kelly Ice can definitely perform. I gotta say it underperformed a little bit in this tournament, but it's still a duo. I would not say it's washed right now. It is not usable because it had one bad showing. I think players have to adjust to the meta changes. I mean, the meta is fresh. It isn't officially out yet as well, so we gotta wait and see. But then we also see Miraidon with Shadow Rider, and Kyogre Zacian is something a lot of players have high hopes on because of Sword and Shield. Kyogre Zacian was one of the best duos in Sword and Shield. I think it's not the best in Sky Violet. I tested it a little bit last week on my Twitch channel on Showdown. I didn't really like it, but many players might find success with this duo because Zacian struggles against Incineroar, and does your opponent want to switch Incineroar into Kyogre? I don't know about that. You remove a fire weakness in general, and that's why in general Zacian Kyogre can work. Lunala Ice Rider is interesting. You can see this hard Trick Room team placing 22nd. I think with 3 normal types it's okay because you can deal with a Shadow Rider somehow. But it's thought that I thought Necrozma Dawnwings would be a better choice than if you want to play a hard Trick Room team. But we see Kelly Ice with Lunala. Another Ogre Zacian, Lunala Terrapagos, interestingly enough. Also a Frosmoth placing 26th. But not super interesting stuff. I guess Alex Underhill's team 30th is a little more interesting with Tinglu Dondozo approach. With both Zamazenta and Shadow Rider, we saw Tinglu Dozo in Regulation G with either Shadow Rider or Zamazenta. Now we have both, so that's for sure interesting. And he placed in top 32, so that's not bad. But other than that, nothing spectacular. Mao Harada, one of the best Japanese players, also on Terrapagos Koraidon, and Chichiot, one of the best Italian players on Ice Rider Miraidon. So as you can see, a lot of comfort picks, nothing too crazy. I mean, you should not pair your Groudon with your Kyogre, because that's obviously not going to work out, but it's still interesting to see that there's only a handful of different restricted pairs, which we can see on this little graphic. Restricted pairs in general, and it was to be expected that Shadow Rider Zamazenta is going to be the most used restricted pair. It also had a good conversion rate. For those who don't know what conversion rate means, it just means that it has a good showing in day 2 after day 1 results. For example, if let's say 100 players used a duo and then only one of them goes into day 2, that is obviously a very bad conversion rate, okay? And as you can see, the one from Shadow Rider Zama is really good. I mean, it also won the tournament, and it had a lot of showings in Top Cut in general, and it makes sense. I already talked about it in my last stream. Fighting Ghost coverage is insane. You have 2 very fast Pokemon. You have a support, you have a damage dealer. Both can deal damage. There's nothing that can switch into this duo. Literally nothing. Tell me what switches into Zamazenta plus Shadow Rider. Name me one Pokemon. That is nothing. And this is what makes this duo so nasty. Interestingly enough, Miraidon Kelly Ice, I would say, underperformed a little bit. 16%, it still had a good conversion rate, but as I said, there was, I think, only one in top cut and none in top 8. But I think Miraidon Kelly Ice is still something you have to you need to make a matchup. You need to make a game plan into it. That's what I wanted to say. Or you have to get a matchup into it. If you have a terrible matchup into this stuff, you can see here your team is probably not going to work out that well. We also see Shadow Rider with Koraidon, because Koraidon is a good partner for Shadow Rider because it can punish Incineroar as well, and you can also threaten opposing Zamazenta. I think Shadow Rider Koraidon has a good matchup into Shadow Rider Zamazenta if played correctly. Depends also on the other 4 Pokemon, but for restricted pairs, I would say it has a decent matchup. Kyogre Zacian, after 17 people used it in day 1, only 2 of them made it into day 2, none of them cut. My feeling is right. I think this duo is not good. It is a bait. But what's also bait is Lunala Koraidon. 13 players used it and none of them day 2'd. That is crazy. I think you can do some fun stuff in the sun with Moonlight as well. Moonlight heals 75%. The problem is if you run Moonlight, what do you drop? Because Lunala is a Pokemon that has so many options. Moonlight, Core Mine, Moongeist Beam, Meteor Beam, Moonblast, Psyshock, Trick Room, White Guard, Tailwind, and even more. I think Lunala, you really have to figure out what the best set for your Lunala is. You cannot just say, okay, I will use the most standard set, which is, I think, Moongeist Beam, Meteor Beam, Trick Room, White Guard. You really have to make sure you use the one that fits your team the best. Also, Terra types on Lunala, Water, Fairy, even Fire is usable, I think. Dark, we gotta see. I think Lunala is a very interesting Pokemon. Also, Zacian Miraidon, 10 players used it, none of them day 2'd. But then the best conversion rate, or one of the best, Terapagos. There were only 9 players out of the 263 that believed in this duo, and 4 of them made day 2, and I think 3 of them cut. So, what does make Zama, not Zama, why do I always say Zama? I mean, the format is Zama pilled, let's be real, but what makes Terapagos Shadow Rider so good? Shadow Rider has the benefit of removing those fighting types, the only weakness of Terapagos. While Terapagos, when it's not terrestrialized, struggles against ghost types with Terra Starstorm, and Shadow Rider can remove those. But that's not it. Terapagos is also just really good to remove the weather from Kyogre or Koraidon, so that your Shadow Rider stays longer on the field. And Shadow Rider has some really nice supporting tools, because you can run Focus Test Shadow Rider, and you have an open move slot. I guess Dual Step Protect is pretty much always played on Shadow Rider, but you can get creative. You can play Anchor to disrupt your opponent. I mean, we saw Anchor Screamtail with Terapagos work out in the last regulation, so why should it not work with a Shadow Rider that is almost as fast as a Booster Energy Screamtail? But it has the offensive pressure as well. You can run Disable, even without Anchor, you can run Disable to just make sure that your opponent cannot go for close combat twice, or choice-locked Pokemon, like Miraidon. If Tailwind or Trick Room is not up and Shadow Rider outspeeds with Miraidon, you can technically go for Protect. They click Volt Switch. When you are faster, you disable them. They cannot do anything. So that is also very sweet. And last but not least, Shadow Rider can also run Will-O-Wisp to burn stuff like Zamazenta, and then Terapagos suddenly beats Zamazenta. So overall, a restricted duo that is still a little underexplored, and I think one of the rising stars from this tournament. You also see that Lunala, Groudon didn't make day 2. Miraidon, Lunala had 2 showings. I think one was top 32 and one was top 4, actually. Still curious how it will play out. We will take a look at the exact teams in a little bit, as I said. But for sure, an interesting format. I'm also a little surprised to only see Zamazenta with Shadow Rider. You also only see Terapagos with Shadow Rider, basically. You basically see Shadow Rider with everything that is not Ice Rider, because you cannot play Shadow Rider, Ice Rider. But I think the best or the most we can take from this tournament as restricted pairs is that you need a good matchup into Zama, Shadow Rider. If you can get a good matchup into it, let's be real. Shadow Rider, Terapagos, Ice Rider, Miraidon, and Shadow Rider, Koraidon. I think these are the top 4 duos you really gotta focus on. I think Pokemon like Lunala and Kyogre and Zacian are still something you have to respect, but they will have less usage than the rest. Here's the restricted usage for the Pokemon themselves. Lunala number 4 is actually quite big. Didn't have the best conversion rate, but other than that, over 50% of the teams have Shadow Rider. Over 50%. That is insane. Let's see if it will stay that way. It definitely can, but yeah, and here you can again see the conversion rate of Terapagos was just really good. 10% to 21 is phenomenal. For non-restricteds, Instant Urshifu Rillaboom is is the most brain-dead option. When both Orapon, as I mentioned, I'm a little surprised to see Iron Hands that high. I guess every Miraidon team, or almost every Miraidon team, has Iron Hands, and it is also a third fake-out user next to Incineroar and Rillaboom, and it also counters the Miraidon Kelly Ice teams. Countering is a little much. It soft checks those archetypes. But then you see Whimsicott and Farigiraf making a splash. That's because of the Miraidon team. Players are just using existing teams and then maybe replacing 1 or 2 Pokemon with a new restricted and see how it works out. And that's why we have a lot of Whimsicott and Farigiraf usage, because Awubega was the most played team, and Awubega versions now will still be played very often. What is super interesting to me is the conversion rate of Raging Bolt. Raging Bolt performed terrible. 15% in day 1, only 2 of them made day 2, 5%, and I think none of them cut. So Raging Bolt, apparently a fraud? I don't know. It's super weird to see, because I think Raging Bolt is not bad. It has a strong priority move. It matches up nicely, or at least not terrible, into Shadow Rider Zama, because you've got a strong Thunderclap. But it performed pretty bad. I think this is something to learn on. Grimmsnarl screens are back again. I think screams will be more promising than ever. And yeah, Chiyu, Fluttermane, Amoonguss, only 3 Amoonguss in day 2. Let's be honest, it will not stay that way. I think it's always the same. Amoonguss starts with very low usage and then it crawls its way back up. So yeah. Also, Dondozo, 5%. Ditto will definitely be used more often. Smeargle. Volcarona, interestingly enough. 1 Volcarona in day 2. No Warring Moon after 12 people used it. Wood Bonnet in the top 30. Also interesting. So, yeah, I think we should take a look at the teams a little more closely. So, let's do that. Please keep in mind that I will only talk about the top 8 teams. So if there's something that was really, really cool and you want to see more of in of the team, maybe something that only placed in day 2 but didn't make top cut, feel free to check out my Twitch channel tomorrow. I will test out a lot of teams on a live stream on Pokemon Showdown. But yeah, let's talk about the teams. So the first place, Lorenzo Silvestrini used this team, and it is just a very standard Kelly Shadow Balance team. Terra Bug, Rocky Helmet, Incineroar with Helping Hand. I already mentioned in my latest video why Terra Bug Incineroar is really good, because Terra Bug Incineroar is able to survive a Body Press plus Astral Barrage from Kelly Shadow and Zamazenta. You can also do it with Terra Fairy, Poison, and Flying. The problem is with Poison you are weak to Psychic, with Fairy you are weak to Heavy Slam. So with Bug you have a typing that actually can always Terra against Zama Shadow Rider. You should not Terra your Incin in that matchup, but maybe in a pinch it can help you out that way. You got this Jungle Boss core of Incin, Willa, Urshifu, Redirection, and Ogapon, which you always, or not always, often see on these kind of teams as well. And yeah, the Terra Dark Shadow Rider with Life Orb plus Terra Dragon Zamazenta. Behemoth Bash instead of Heavy Slam, because now there are a lot of Pokemon that Heavy Slam is just weaker into, and Terra Fairy Shadow Rider will not be a thing, I think. You don't have the time to get Core Mines up to use Draining Kills that effectively. I think a Focus Sash or Life or Calyrex Shadow Rider set is much better. And yeah, I don't know what much I can add here after, other than it's just a solid team, nothing crazy. I guess Terra Water Rillaboom is interesting instead of Terra Fire, but I already mentioned that in my last video as well, why Terra Water is good into stuff like Ice Rider as well as Koraidon or Groudon as well. With Terra Fire you are weak to Precipice Blades, for example. So yeah, because that team might struggle into Groudon, honestly, but there was no Groudon in Top Cut, and I think Groudon is a fraud, but yeah, other than that, team is just super solid. Nothing much to be said. Honestly, I really enjoy seeing just consistent, well-performing teams. And then in finals, we've had this Dondozo team, and I hate it because I just hate Dondozo. And we have a lot of interesting stuff here. The Assault Vest Miraidon, which was a Pokemon you saw on Dondozo teams before. We see Calyrex Shadow, which was also a thing on Dondozo with Life Orb. We see Chi-Yu, which was also a thing, but also Sneasler. So it's kind of a 2-2-2 team, I would say. You either bring Miraidon, Sneasler, Dondozo, Tatsu. You can go for Toxic Spikes route as well. That's what made Weezing Dondozo so good in Wake G, and especially because Amoonguss usage is very low right now, Toxic Spikes are a threat to consider. And also Kelly Shadow Chi-Yu is obviously a very, very strong core. You can also do something like Miraidon, Chi-Yu, Dondozo, Tatsu. You can go for Miraidon, Shadow Rider, Chi-Yu, Sneasler. You can even go for something like Miraidon, Sneasler, Tatsu, Shadow Rider, and don't bring the Chi-Yu, just because of Helping Hand and Focus Sash. Tatsu can work that way as well. You never bring solo Dozo, I think. And do you bring... Yeah, you can also bring... like, with this team, you can bring just one restricted. You can bring both restricted. If you bring Sneasler, you bring Miraidon. That's a rule. But why is that team so good? Or why did it perform that well? I think it has a very, very good matchup into the Zama Shadow Rider teams. I mean, it lost in the finals, but the unaware Dondozo with T-Spikes is just really threatening, because we saw that the Incineroar didn't have Will-O-Wisp as well, so you can get T-Spikes up with your Sneasler, then go into Dondozo, and the team can't handle Dondozo that well, because Zama and Shadow Rider don't do that much damage into Dozo, while Rillaboom gives a grassy terrain, and I think Droopy is the defense boosting Tatsugiri, so after a few order ups, Rillaboom doesn't do any damage, Incin doesn't do any damage, Urshifu doesn't do that much damage, Ogerpon doesn't do that much damage. So yeah, I think this team matches up very well into the most common team. I don't like Dozo into Miraidon teams, or like bringing it into Miraidon teams, but maybe this is where the Sneasler and the Terra Fairy Assault Vest Miraidon can shine. So smart team building, a lot of good pieces. I think maybe you can also swap items like Sash Chiyu and Scarf Tatsu, because Sash Chiyu is also a headache when you play against the Dozo. But other than that, just a very strong 2-2-2 Dozo team. Then in semifinals, we've had this team, and I think that this team has some interesting stuff going for it. First of all, what I immediately realized is that this team only has one Protect, and I don't like playing with just one Protect, but it clearly worked out for Seawolf Mikes. He also used Electric Seed Lunala, which makes sense because Miraidon is a Pokemon you lead very often, so getting a free defense boost on Lunala is nice. You also weaken a knockoff from Incineroar, for example, which is another nice benefit of playing Electro Seed Lunala. Interestingly enough, we see Psyshock instead of something like Moonblast. Psyshock hits Urshifu, I guess, but Psyshock probably doesn't one-hit KO. It hits Iron Hands. I guess for Iron Hands it makes sense, because Miraidon, as I said before, can struggle into Iron Hands. And it also hits Terastallized Shadow Rider, I guess, Terra Normal. I'm not a big fan of Psyshock, but it certainly has its reasons. We've got Trick Room and Wildcard on the Lunala, because having the option to go for Tailwind with Whimsicott or Trick Room with Lunala is cool, because we saw that it won which regionals was it? Vancouver, I think, where Tailwind won. San Antonio was won by Tailwind, both times with Warring Moon and Kelly Ice, or Warring Moon and Lunala. But Tailwind is just a playstyle that is very flexible, and you can adapt into a lot of situations. And something like Iron Hands and Trick Room is just super strong. Miraidon and Tailwind is super strong, so you have a lot of different modes. And that being said, I mean, it's just, again, 4 Pokemon of Arubega. Then we sometimes also saw Chiyu instead of Ogerpon Halflame there as well. And then it's Lunala instead of Farigiraf. So you just have to keep in mind that your Miraidon is susceptible to Fake Out. But the Fake Out users you can abuse with Chiyu, for example. Like, Chiyu is really good into Rillaboom. And I guess Incineroar is a little annoying for the team, but he would have not made it to top 4 without beating Incineroar. So yeah, a team I think doesn't suit my playstyle, but if you want to try it out, I can EV it for you tomorrow. But then there's this team that also made top 4 of Victory Road with Zama Shadow Rider again. Disable Shadow Rider. As I mentioned, really good into the choice-locked Pokemon. Terra Fairy Incineroar. Terra Fairy is an interesting choice. It makes sense if you don't want to run Bug, because the problem with Bug is you are susceptible to Flare Blitz from Koraidon. Because if you want to intimidate Life Orb Koraidon, Terra Fairy Incin is better into that. But then I would still prefer Terra Flying, to be honest. But if you want Terra Flying, you are always weak to Kelly Ice. So it's just something you probably figure out after playing games which Terra is the best. But Terra Fairy is interesting for sure. Would have not been my first choice, honestly. What is interesting on that team as well? I guess the Terra Stellar Life Orb Pelipper is something you do not expect. In general, this team doesn't have any form of speed control. You don't have Tailwind, you don't have Trick Room. Instead, you have double White Guard. And you also have Taunt on Urshifu with Mystic Water, Terra Water, Rain. These modifiers are insane. But I'm very surprised to see Terra Stellar on a Life Orb Pelipper. I would have expected Terra Ghost, Terra Grass, or I would have more understand it. Even Terra Normal, if you don't want to click White Guard in front of Shadow Rider, for example. But Terra Stellar Life Orb and Mystic Water, Terra Water, Urshifu, these modifiers are going crazy. And yeah, the Among Us with Terra Dark. Terra Dark is really good into Psy Spam, and also make sure you are not susceptible to Prankster Anchor and Prankster Taunt. So this team again, it has very common Pokemon in Kelly Shadow, Zama, Incin, Among Us, Shifu. Pelipper is something we still have to figure out how good it is, but it makes sense because Kelly Shadow Zama struggles into Koraidon, can also struggle into Groudon, and if you have a Pelipper for that, it can work wonders. So I'm not at all surprised that this team performed well. But there are some things that are a little bit questionable, or like they look different than I would have anticipated. Because you have no form of speed control. At least play Scarf Urshifu, or I don't know. I mean, Urshifu Choice Scarf is a main way to deal with Shadow Rider, and he has double White Guard, Assault Vest Instant, Sash, Shadow Rider, Terra Dark Among Us. So maybe it's not needed for Shadow Rider, but still, seeing no speed control at all is crazy. I guess we also saw no speed control with the Dondozo team, but I would say Electric Seed, Sneasler, Dondozo, these teams never really had speed control. Choice Scarf Chiyu, I mean, there was a Choice Scarf Chiyu, so it still had something. And then we've got this, which has Tailwind, Tornadus as speed control. Again, Terra Water, Mystic Water, Urshifu with Taunt. But Imprison Shadow Rider. Super interesting, because this is an Imprison Pokemon that is not meant to counter Trick Room, but instead counter Shadow Rider. And I can see it. Shadow Rider looks annoying into that team. We also have Ability Shield Tornadus to have a matchup into stuff like Koraidon, Weezing, Shadow Rider Weezing, right? And interestingly enough, this team made it to top 8, and there are things that I, again, would have not anticipated. Sacred Sword on Incin makes sense to punish dark types that Cataracte Shadow struggles into. Seeing both Sacred Sword and Play Rough is something I didn't expect beforehand, and also this Imprisoned Shadow Rider. You have to win a speed tie, or I guess you can go for something like Tailwind Imprison if you have an opposing Shadow Rider on the field. And I really like that if you go for Imprison, your opponent can also not go for Protect, which means you can use your Tailwind turns the fullest. We see an Ogerpon Cornerstone, which makes sense on a team like this, because Sturdy Ogerpon Cornerstone just gives you this second life. I mean, it is so nasty. Sash, Shadow Rider, and Sturdy Cornerstone, removing both takes so many resources if you don't have Urshifu Rapid Strike. But for Urshifu Rapid Strike, you've got a Rillaboom, you've got the Zacian Crown, you've got a Tornadus. So yeah, very smart team building. Again, no fighting move on Urshifu. Sometimes, I mean, Taunt is very, very good. I don't know if it is amazing in the double restricted format, because I think in general what you can say is that Regulation I is very fast paced. The games will not last long, at least from my experience. So we gotta see how good also Calm Mind setup and stuff like this is going to be. Speaking of Calm Mind setup, here we are. Calm Mind Terrapagos, Marco Fierro, Marco Silva used this team to also get into top 8. And instead of seeing Shadow Rider with supporting tools for Terrapagos, we instead see set up Shadow Rider, set up Terrapagos, and then the common 4 again, Jungle Bros and Ogerpon Halfname with Grassy Glide. So the same 4 as Lorenzo Silvestrini, just with restricted changed. Instead of Zamazenta, it's a Terrapagos. And I really like that you can play the mode of Rilla Instant Ogerpon Kelly Shadow, which was very common in the past. You can play Rilla Instant Ogre Shifu, running no restricted is probably also an option, but you can also go for Rilla Instant Ogre Terrapagos, Rilla Instant Shifu Terrapagos. I think with this team, other than all the other teams we've had so far, you sometimes only bring Shadow Rider or Terrapagos, while on the teams we've had so far, you were really committed to bring both your restricteds into your game plan. But with an approach like this one, you can still bring both, don't get me wrong, but some teams just really struggle into Terrapagos, and then you work everything around Terrapagos, and some teams really struggle into Shadow Rider, and then you adjust your game plan on Shadow Rider only. You can, as I said, bring both, but you usually don't want to have this board of Kelly Shadow and Terrapagos when you face down something like Choice Scarf, Urshifu, since if you want to set up Pokemon, you want to support it as well, right? It's not undoable to bring both of them, but it's a different approach when most of players went into a Regulation I think. I never played Double Restricted before, so I might be completely wrong on that, because I think in the past some teams also just relied on one restricted only, and Sword and Shield, for example, you didn't have to bring both restricteds to your game. I guess with Rinja-san, Charizard was basically your second restricted. Sometimes you bought Groudon and Charizard, but you didn't bring your Zacian, right? So it makes sense. Or was Rinja-san Lunala? Wait. I think Rinja-san was Lunala, not Zacian. I meant Lunala. My bad. Was it Lunala? Wait, I do not remember. I only watched the finals once. That's all I know about Rinja-san. I'm sorry, guys. But yeah, just a very solid team again. Terra Water, Rillaboom, Ogerpon with Grassy Glide, Terra Water, Urshifu. Nothing much to be said here. I guess Earth Power and Terrapagos is interesting instead of a more common, or like at least in Reg G, more common substitute. Earth Power is strong because if you have Kelly Shadow and Terrapagos on the board, you can nuke Incineroar with Astral Barrage, Terra Stellar, Terra Earth Power. You can also threaten Zamazenta, you can threaten Zacian. Steel types in general are rising. And if you don't want to Terra your Terrapagos, you maybe still want to have a move to hit opposing Shadow Rider with. And this is why Earth Power was probably chosen over Substitute. Then we've got this team that also made it to top 8. And yeah, again, just 2 protects. And it looks like a Jamie Boyd team to me. But maybe it's because of Bubone, Whimsicott, Ditto all being on one team. I don't know where to start. I mean, it was to be expected that Kelly Shadow, Koraidon, Scarf, Geo was to be good. Sash, Ditto also makes sense. I guess with Bubonnet patches up the Ice Rider matchup, which would otherwise be very hard. And Whimsicott provides Helping Hand and Anchor support and Tailwind support. Like, you've got all of this in one package again. And Substitute Kelly Shadow can buy turns because your opponent has to double into Kelly Shadow. But if you go for Protect, they are screwed. And sometimes you can also go for a free Substitute because you've got Rage Powder Bubonnet or Anchor Whimsicott, and you can do a lot of wild stuff. But this is not going to be meta relevant. Like, it's not going to be one of the top teams, I think, because it looks very hard to play. I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm just saying that it requires perfect precision to play a team like this. But yeah, also seeing Koraidon with just no other Sun abusers like Raging Bolt and Fluttermane is also definitely interesting. I mean, Bluebonnet and Chiyu are basically Sun abusers. Kelly Shadow is also a semi-Sun abuser because now Kelly Shadow survives the Terra Water Surging Strikes from Urshifu Rapid Strike. But yeah, very weird team. I don't know. Nothing for me, I guess. And then last but not least, this is just an approach I was talking about earlier. Just take an existing team, replace one Pokemon, and pray for the best. Because this is the Joseph Ugarte, Miraidon Volcarona team with just one change: Zamazenta instead of Urshifu. And it worked. And this is something I really realized watching all of those teams, or taking a look at all those teams. Really, if you don't know what to do in Regulation I, just take a team that you really had fun with and just replace one Pokemon with another restricted and see how it goes. That this team is strong is definitely no surprise. I mean, you've got Zamazenta and Miraidon behind screens, you've got Volcarona to counter kind of Zama Shadow Rider teams. Struggle Bug is interesting, but it also makes sense because there are a lot of special attackers with Shadow Rider, Miraidon, Lunala, and way more. But yeah, I think out of those teams, do you have a favorite? Are you surprised by anything? I am honestly most surprised that this team made it to top 8. But it is really cool to see that even though there are a lot of same Pokemon, it still has a lot of variety, I would say. But yeah, I will present you some good sets and spreads for the 4 restricted I mentioned earlier in the video right now. So yeah, starting with Kelly Shadow, I think if you run a Kelly Shadow with Life Orb, you want to run Max Speed for sure. There are Terra Dark and Terra Normal as Terra types, as we saw. We also saw the one Terra Ghost Life Orb Shadow Rider, but I think if you run Terra Ghost, you are forced to play Substitute, or like you can only play Terra Ghost if you have Substitute, when you are allowed to do that, because otherwise it's just very hard to use an offensive Terra to like justify it. We saw Anchor on the Dondozo team with Life Orb, and we saw Nasty Plot on the team from Marco Fierro, for example, or Lorenzo Silvestrini. I think it kind of depends on how offensive this team is. If your team is very offensive, I recommend running this Kelly Shadow spread, because that way you just maximize your damage. You still have a little bit of bulk, but there's pretty much no difference between 220 and 252. But if you wanna run a more balanced approach, like Marco Fierro, for example, you can run a spread like this, because that way you survive a Terra Water Surging Strikes, you still don't get more Life Orb recoil, and you have a very high special attack regardless. You can also run 140 special attack and 28 HP, doesn't matter. Just make sure that you know what you are EV'd to. But these are my recommendations for this Life Orb Kelly Shadow. Focus Sash Kelly Shadow is, I think, no surprise, just max. But what moves should you play? I am a little curious why people opted to play Psyshock instead of Psychic, because Psychic is way stronger into Zamazenta most of all, and I think it's also stronger into Assault West Iron Hands. I guess Psyshock counters Imprison Kelly Shadow, because if Imprison Kelly Shadow runs Psychic and you got Psyshock, at least you can still do something. But Psychic is also way stronger into Amoonguss, so I would always want Psychic instead of Psyshock, but if you expect Imprison, you can also run Psyshock, obviously. And then we've got some supporting tools like Will-O-Wisp, Disable Anchor. I already talked about it. Will-O-Wisp is really strong into Zamazenta or against Zamazenta. Disable is really strong against Miraidon. And Anchor, it's Anchor, guys. Anchor is always good. It's not Prankster Anchor, but it's a very fast Anchor. So, it works against Fake Out and Cineroar, for example. So yeah, and on a Focus Sash set, you can definitely play Terra Ghost. You can still go for a defensive Terra to survive Terra Water Surging Strikes, even in rain, with like Terra Grass or Terra Water. I think Terra Grass Sash sounds a little weird, but it also gives you the Spore immunity, Rage Powder immunity if you want to go for something like Anchor or Disable, and also the Surging Strikes resist, right? So you can also run Sash Terra Grass. Sash Terra Ghost is the more default option though. Zamazenta, I realized that max speed Impish Zamazenta is probably still the choice, because as you saw, there was so much Ogerpon, and maybe some Miraidon are playing a slower Miraidon. Focus Sash Chiyu. We also saw that Landorus was being played, Landorus I, and maybe they played Timid. So I featured a very bulky Zamazenta in my last video where I played, I think, 157 speed, but max speed is probably still the best choice. Terra Dragon or Terra Ghost. Terra Dragon is better defensively, but Terra Ghost can get you into positions where you just win the game because your opponent cannot fake out your Zamazenta. Especially with Calyrex, it's nice to have two fake out immunities that do so much damage. As I said, there's no switching into Astral Barrage Body Press, and you can't even stop it with fake out. But Terra Dragon is better defensively because you suddenly resist Surging Strikes, you resist Fire, you resist Electro Drift from Miraidon. So yeah, I think Dragon is more consistent, but Ghost can win you games more immediately, if you understand what I mean. And then Kelly Ice, this spread is very good, I think, because you can also run less speed IVs, of course, but I think with this spread, you create a lot of things, because you always survive Timid Electro Drift from Miraidon, and Meteor Beam from Lunala only has a 6% chance to KO, and Astral Barrage from Life Orb Shadow Rider is in your favor. So this Kelly Ice spread is a lot of fun because you also get the last jump point in attack. And Terra Fire or Terra Water. Terra Fire obviously better into stuff like Shadow Rider Chiyu, Shadow Rider Koraidon, Koraidon Chiyu, but Terra Water helps into Urshifu Rapid Strike, also helps into Koraidon, to be fair, but it also helps into Groudon, like you are not weak to something like Heatwave, Precipice Blade. I think Groudon's still a fraud, but yeah, these are the most common types on Kelly Ice. Miraidon with choice specs. For now, my bad, there's no difference in 244 and 252, I think. For now, I would run a Timid Nature, just because I think players might want to get cheeky and run Jolly Zama, just saying. And that's where Timid Miraidon can catch them off guard. And obviously there's also Flutter Mane, and Koraidon and opposing Miraidon and I guess Modest Shadow Rider, Adamantization, technically a lot of stuff you can punish by playing Timid Miraidon. The lack of damage is definitely something you will feel. As I said, Viscalites always survives Timid. Modest would have a 50% chance to KO, I think. And also against Amoonguss, some Amoonguss might be EV'd for Timid Draco, but not for Modest Draco. So in the end, it's a preference thing. But I think for now, I would run Timid if I were you. And last but not least, the Assault Vest Miraidon. The Assault Vest Miraidon, I decided to run 182 speed because Zamazenta has, with an impish nature, makes speed 180. So players might get cheeky to run 181. So you should run 182. After this video, you should run 183. Now that I said it, you should run 184. Maybe 185 to outspeed Whimsicott because max speed Whimsicott has 184. Why not just run max speed at that point? So, I don't know. I think you can also play a little less special attack, but since you don't have a choice specs, you're only Assault Vest. I still wanted to maximize the damage, but also not go full special attack. So I guess maximize is the wrong word. I just guess it's increase the damage and still have a little bit of bulk, as you can see here. That's a certified Michael approved Miraidon spread, but yeah, the speed stat is always something you have to make adjustments on based on what other players might play. So if you wanna run a max speed Miraidon, I think Timid is just your damage is just really bad, man. So you should still run Modest. So technically what you could do is run something like this, or if you say you don't need that much bulk because you've got the Assault Vest to help out with it anyways, you can also run something like this, or no bulk at all and just max Modest, something like this. Feel free to test out yourself. These are the spreads and sets for the restricted I already made ultimate guides on, as I said before. And if you don't want to miss ultimate guides in the future and just in general very helpful stuff, because I provide rental teams, I provide poker pastes that are also EV'd in my I Played Against series, and even more, feel free to subscribe. I did this plug in the end because I think I'm not disturbing anyone with that. That being said, I hope you enjoyed this rather long video. I think Regulation I is something I am really excited to. For now, it can change after a few weeks because for now it's also kind of one-sided with Kali Shadow Zama being almost everywhere. But let's see how the next tournament goes. Maybe we will have another Victory Road Tour before the Regulation I gets announced. I don't know yet. And let me know in the comments below which team you are looking forward most to, and maybe restricted that were underused. For example, where was Ho-Oh? Where was Rayquaza? Do you think they have a spot in the meta? Let me know, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.